the free lunch election. What a depressing election this is. But not just for the reasons that you might think. It's conventional to say that we have a pretty uninspiring political class at the moment, that neither Labour nor Conservative have really exciting policies to offer. They're all playing safe. They tell us they're not going to put up the taxes. They compete to see who can offer pensioners the best deal. They unwind and set out policies that sound much more than they actually are, whether it be Great British Energy with its very small amount of money that's going to transform our energy sector within just 5 years and lower all our bills, or it's national service, and without the proper costings, without the detail of exactly how it's going to work, and so on and so forth. One promise after another. So it is depressing. But it's easy to think that, well, if only we had better politicians, it would all be fine. We would get out of the difficulties we currently find ourselves. What we need is a new, inspiring leader who's going to set out a really bold and positive vision going forward. Well, it would probably be pretty close to suicide for any politician to tell people the truth about the state we're in, about how unsustainable our economy is and our broader environment too. And the reason for that is not that politicians are particularly weak, although they may well be. It's because they're trying to get our votes. We're the people who vote for these politicians, and we get what it is that we echo back from them in terms of promises, commitments, and so on. So, we want better health service. We want it free at the point of delivery, regardless of all the new drugs coming along, regardless of the obesity endemic, regardless of the diabetes, regardless of all the problems out there. We just want a better health service. But we don't want to pay for it. On the contrary, what we want is taxes not to go up. And we're dead keen on politicians who promise not to increase income tax, national insurance, VAT, or corporation tax. So, no more money, but we want more services. Surprise, surprise. It's the kind of cakeism that we got from Boris Johnson a few years ago. We want serious defence. I suspect most of the public is pretty alarmed by what's going on in Ukraine, the threat, Russia, Chinese spies and so on. And most people recognise that we have a paltry defence force to deal with this. Aircraft carriers that don't seem to work very well, a fleet which is much diminished, a relatively small army to confront a whole range of new problems out there. So, let's promise 2.5 or 3% of GDP. But again, let's not promise that your taxes are going to go up to pay for it. It's going to be yet another free lunch like the health service. And we can go on from this. We actually don't really want to work that much, or at least some of us don't. And the health problems in the workforce are serious and endemic. So we have nearly 20% of the workforce not working, not actively seeking employment. And so the irony is that while we want to pay good social security and support to these people, and we want the health services to be there for them, on the other hand, we have, as a result, a tight labour force and wage inflation. The headline inflation numbers might come down, but not wages. But again, it's not that long ago that Boris Johnson thought it was clever to tell people they were really pleased that wages were going up, without explaining why productivity was not going up. So costs up, output flat. Consequence, someone else will have to pay for that. Maybe that comes insidiously via inflation. These problems, and one can look across the various sectors, higher education, the schools, one can look at a whole range of local government services, one can look at the state of the infrastructures, the potholes in the roads, and ask ourselves, well, why is this like this? We could say, why did politicians let this happen? But again, the truth is, we don't want to pay for it. We don't want our water bills to go up. We don't want our council tax to go up. We don't want our energy bills to go up. Indeed, we wanted the state to subsidise almost half the electricity bills when there was a price shock. So it's us that demand that we have our cake and eat it. It's us that demand that we want all these extra goodies, but we don't want to pay for it. And if we look further forward, there's another dimension that we don't want to face up to. If we need all this investment, if we're really razor keen to develop offshore wind, maybe onshore wind, solar, nuclear, hydrogen, almost everything you can think of within the energy sector on a fast track. If that's what we want, then, sad to say, someone has to pay. And not only do we not want to pay higher bills, and we want to perhaps vote for politicians who are going to promise, I think disingenuously, that the bills are going to go down, but we want all that investment done on the basis of borrowing, and we don't want to save. We don't want to forego our consumption in the short run in order to put in place those assets for the medium and longer term. And if you think through this, net savings in the UK, that's government plus industry plus us, the households, is negative, net of capital depreciation. And that just tells you pretty straightforwardly that what we want to do is to get foreigners to lend the money to build all these assets without cost to us, and then all that debt can be paid back by the next generation. Again, it's a selfish motive of the electorate. It's understandable how one gets to this because one hears it echoed back to us by the politicians. It's not going to cost you. It's a free lunch. Well, it isn't. And so if we wanted an election which was serious about the context in which we find ourselves, we would have politicians spelling out just how much our infrastructure needs to be invested in, just how much will be needed to transform the health service and the education system, just how much is going to be needed to give us a proper defence, and just how much is needed to stop the tragedy of the state of our natural environment, the rivers, and so on and so forth. And they would spell out that it's our duty to save, to provide the funds for the investment, instead of relying on foreigners to lend us the money, and by the way, largely to now foreign-owned companies, since we've sold off a great deal of the family silver to live beyond our means. And it's inevitable that because we don't manufacture much in this country, the foreigners will have to lend us the money. We will have sold off the companies to them, and they'll be buying from foreign supply chains. So much for made in Britain. It would take a brave politician to tell us what it would really mean to re-industralise Britain, to build those solar panels, those wind turbines, and those nuclear reactors all in the UK. That would be a huge challenge, a massive investment requirement, and again, it would need substantive domestic savings. So this is where we find ourselves. This is why it's somewhat depressing to look at this election, because ultimately it's us that want a free lunch, and it's hard to blame politicians who want to get elected for promising that indeed they're going to deliver a free lunch. But I think we all know deep down that this just isn't sustainable. This is an unsustainable economy and an unsustainable structure for our citizens, societies, and our businesses. And you can go on, it turns out, offering free lunches, kicking the can down the road for quite a long time, much longer than you might imagine. We've been doing it for at least a couple of decades or more. In the past, we've had incredibly cheap debt to underpin our unsustainable consumption, our unsustainable economy. But in the end, what is unsustainable will not be sustained. And therefore, just because you kick the can down the road doesn't mean that the can isn't full of holes, and at some stage it's no longer going to be possible to carry out that trick and to borrow in order to patch up the difference. And that's why, unsurprisingly, opinion polls suggest that the majority of people simply don't believe that taxes are not going to go up. They simply don't buy the free lunch that they've been offered. But you know what? They're still going to vote for it. And in voting for it, and with politicians promising to meet it, that goes beyond simply the problems and shocks that will come further down the track. It also begins to undermine our faith in our democratic institutions. Now, that would be extremely dangerous. So it would be nice that people would be offered lunch and the bill to pay for it. It would be nice if politicians would spell out the truths that are involved in that. But sadly, it looks like we're going to carry on our unsustainable path until it's no longer sustained. And then we'll have to deal with the consequences. And the longer the can is kicked down the road, the worse those consequences will be. Thank you.